Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast where we talk about the intersection of art, culture, and big ideas. I'm your host, Sean Malone, the creator of the Out of Frame series on YouTube and creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education. Back in studio here with Paul Nelson, our head of social media and senior marketing manager, and of course, Jen Maffasanti, who is communications director for the Libertas Institute in Utah. How are you doing, Jen?
Doing okay. Fielding some feisty emails this morning in response to one that I sent out yesterday, or actually this morning. I scheduled it yesterday, whatever. It's
the
fine.
joys of being
has no meaning.
The joys of being a communications director, no doubt.
Yeah.
So what are your feisty emails all about?
Occupational licensure, if you would believe it. Okay, so
I would believe it.
Yeah.
So in Utah's something like the 16th or 17th most burdensome state in the U.S. for occupational licensure. Basically, there are a lot of people who have to get a permission slip, essentially, from the government in order to be able to do their jobs. And it is very difficult and it's very expensive for a lot of professions. And it doesn't need to be that way.
Like, shameless plug here, but I've done a handful of documentaries on this subject. Probably most notably a documentary called Locked Out, where to give some specifics to Jen's point, it was occupational licensing around African hair braiding in Mississippi, and it was a close to $20,000 cosmetology license, basically. Ultimately, that was more or less what you would have to get in order to be a hair braider, a fully licensed legal hair braider in Mississippi. It'd take you 2 years to go through that program, and it didn't teach you anything about hair braiding. So, that's fairly common of occupational licensure. So it's pretty crazy, and it's crazy that a lot of people don't even really realize that it's a thing, which I always find interesting. Like, most people don't have a sense that, like, tree trimmers, for example, have, sometimes a year or more very expensive licensing. A lot of these licenses for things like that end up costing more and taking more time than the training you would get to be on the police force, which often feels backwards to me.
We have no issues there.
Yeah, for sure. So
I'm surprised, by the way, that Utah is so bad on that list. I would have thought Utah was better.
You'd think that, wouldn't you? But unfortunately, it's still a hassle for a lot of people. In fact, this year's legislative session, we worked really, really hard to get a bill passed that sort of exempted people who wash, dry, and style hair. Like, those are all the services that they offer.
Dangerous.
Blow dry bars, basically.
Shockingly dangerous.
Shockingly dangerous. Like,
you gotta protect those consumers there.
But we got the law changed so that they no longer had to have the full cosmetology license. It was just like a 1-2 hour health and safety course that they had to pass. So you would not believe, you two probably would, but it was astonishing the amount of pushback that we got from the cosmetology industry about just this one tiny little exemption for this one very specific kind of service.
Yeah, no, the cosmetologist in Mississippi said that Melanie, who was the person who was fighting this in Mississippi, was going to give people AIDS. And then
what?
Yeah. Well, so she didn't have any training on how to prevent the spread of AIDS. And so what if she spread it without a license? What was to stop her from spreading AIDS? And then you have to ask the really important question, does your cosmetology program teach people how to deal with AIDS? No, it did not. So, brilliant arguments there all around.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So there are a lot of obstacles in the way for people to actually just do their jobs. And this is a huge deal, especially for lower income people. Like, that puts a good job really out of financial reach for a lot of people. Like, people going into debt to get a cosmetology license.
Oh, worse.
Come on.
It's just for like washing and blow drying people's hair. I mean,
Exactly.
it's the same with like braiding hair, which is just like, seriously, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're not happy with it. Because they don't use like very explicitly don't use chemicals. They don't use heat treatment. Like there's none of this stuff that like they typically do.
Cutting.
There's not even cutting. Vast majority of the time, it's the only services these kinds of places offer is just braiding and twists, and it's the weirdest thing. And there's also like in that case there's like kind of racism embedded in some of it too, because it's like a very culturally specific thing that it's like the sort of all white board of cosmetology is like you're not allowed to do. So it's a little bit like that side of things plays into it as well. But it's just stupid.
It's a whole
it's the dumbest thing.
It's a whole thing. But thankfully, Governor Cox here in Utah is very gung-ho on reforming occupational licensure. His first executive order upon gaining office this current year was to order an evaluation of all of Utah's occupational licensure to see what is excessive, what is unnecessary, and to lower those burdens for a lot of people. And so I've got emails because the report came in, and so now that conversation is starting up again. So I've got a lot of people in my inbox right now. Some of them are very excited about occupational licensure reform, but they're mad because this particular track doesn't go far enough. Like, they just want all occupational licensure everywhere to be abolished like yesterday. And then we've got people on the other end of the spectrum who are like, this is a disaster. You can't do this. I don't agree with your positions on this. This is going to be the worst thing. And
what are some of
that's fun.
So I've heard, obviously, like personally I've been around this for a long time, so I've heard a lot of these kinds of arguments, but I'm curious as to what some of the arguments are that people are giving you who want to keep licensure and who are opposing the new rules.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of the people that respond to me are not also communications professionals, so they just mostly want to voice objections. So they're just mad and they want me to know about it. And okay, that's fine. I appreciate the feedback.
Got a lot of problems with you people.
I need to.
A lot of problems.
Now you're gonna hear about it.
Yeah, it's really same energy.
Yeah.
But they're worried about lawsuits is most of what I'm getting. And
okay, that's a kind of an easily solvable problem.
I don't think there's really a lot of evidence to support that right now, that there would be a dramatic increase in lawsuits if occupational licensing was reduced.
Do we have do we not have enough lawyers to take care of these lawsuits?
Well, that, and also there is, I mean, generally speaking, like the solution to that is basically caveat emptor. I mean, it's like you went to get your hair braided or you went to get your, your lawn mowed or whatever. You don't like it. Hire a different one next time. It's not really the end of the world. The objections that I used to see a lot were, they're predicated on the idea that like the only people, a lot of it's just pure ignorance, because people would go like, well, I can't believe you're opposed to like having a professional class of doctors and surgeons and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, first of all, we could get into the AMA licensing process and the monopoly they have over that. Maybe you don't want to have that conversation. But that said, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, again, lawn cutters, tree trimmers, swimming coaches, stuff that's like, athletic trainers, florists.
Funeral directors. Interior decorators.
Interior decorators, right? Like there are all these things where you just go, event planners, you know, like you're like, okay, your event didn't go as well as you wanted it to, but the market solves those problems because bad event planners, bad videographers, bad florists, whatever, like they don't get work. Because and they get even less work when you reduce the barriers to entry because somebody else can go, that guy's making $100 an hour doing floral arrangements for people and he's terrible. So, I'll do it instead. It's not that hard, you know, to get into that space and compete. And so that really is primarily the solution to that problem. But every time I talk to people, they were like, oh, yeah, but then people will die on the operating table. I'm like, well...
You want kids to die.
You want kids to die of a bad floral
People die on the operating table already.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that? I'm happy to talk about
Again,
that.
that's not the conversation they want to have at that point. But, like, I'm not like... Man, I got to be real careful about this. Some variety of licensure is good, right? Like professional standards are good in many, many industries, and having a body that sort of adjudicates those standards are good. I don't believe that the government is very good at setting those standards. I don't believe that involving the government is usually a good idea because what ends up happening, like with the AMA, for example, is that one entity that should probably be competing with other entities to set standards and balance, you know, costs and benefits of what those standards entail, get you know, special privileges to set things, and then it becomes about their power more than their, you know, the validity of their standards. So that's always an issue. But like, you know, we've got things like Underwriters Laboratory. I always use this as an example, which does all the testing. So most of our like electronics and engineering standards and stuff are set by private entities. I don't know the German words for this, but the ISO, which is or maybe it's actually the ISA, which sets the ISO standards, we use these in camera stuff all the time, but they're actually like broader engineering standards, electrical engineering standards. That's a private entity. You know, Underwriters Laboratory is an entity that actually goes and tests products and judges whether or not they're safe for the public to use. They do that on behalf of insurance companies, on behalf of large, you know, electronics manufacturers or whatever. There's certainly ways to do that without necessarily directly involving the state, but you know, that never ends up being the argument, right? The argument ends up being like you want the kids to die or whatever. It's just like
absolutely, and
good grief.
To the extent that, you know, anyone would want government licensure for this is for the main reason of protecting health and safety of the consumer. All right. Anything beyond that, we're talking about quality. Yeah. And that is not the role of the government.
Or
a Michelin-starred chef and a line cook at McDonald's have the same occupational license. It's a food handler's license. Yeah. You can get it in an afternoon for like $50. I've done it. And there's a huge difference in quality there, but there are outside organizations that can tell you what you might be able to expect from.
That's what Michelin is for. That's what, you know, Zagat ratings are for and all that kind of stuff. But the other thing, we've kind of skirted around this, like what actually happens, at least in my experience looking into this kind of stuff, is that the license is not used to protect health and safety of the consumer. It's used to restrict competition. So it's used 100%. To make so it's used to make sure that like there's only one guild that says we're going to allow you to enter this market, and they do that largely on the basis of you know how much money they stand to gain or lose, or what their balance is. We have had a doctor shortage in the United States for I don't know a decade, more than a decade at this point, maybe 15 years at this point. That's been widely known. Yet we still have tremendous restrictions on who comes in from other countries and can get licensed as a doctor. We also have tremendous restrictions on who is or how many people basically are allowed to do residencies per year. So that's kind of weird, right? Like if we're really struggling to find a bunch of doctors you would think that like in a normal market, in like an unrestricted market, you would see the price go up for doctors, and then more people go, I'll go into medicine, and I will get the training that I need and become a doctor. Well, you can't do that if you're restricted, right? You can't do that if there's some entity setting that rule. So, man, I hate this. I hate this topic so much. I would be, except for I understand your position, but I would be the guy who emailed you and goes like, this isn't enough. Do more. But I'm sure.
And that's the tricky thing about trying to get laws changed, is that if you actually want to change the law, you're going to have to give a little bit.
Yep.
Like there's going to have to be some compromise, some middle ground there. You can't get everything you want straight out the gate. It's a process.
No.
You sound like a liberal, Jen.
I'm
joking.
One.
I'm joking. I'm just poking fun at people that make the argument that you can't compromise.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, politics is messy and gross.
Yep.
And so it really always rubs up against your the purity of principle, right? Like you want to do something like, well, this is wrong, it shouldn't happen. Cold turkey, end the whole thing, right? But I think back to like, I think I may have told this on the podcast before. I'm not really sure. It's been a while if I did, but years ago, I'd done another film on what's basically occupational license. It's actually more business regulation, but it was about food trucks and the ability of food trucks to operate in Washington, D.C. and the D.C. metro area. And I went to a hearing. I went to a city council meeting because they were holding a hearing on behalf of a policy that would have opened up Alexandria, Virginia to food truck operators, which it was not open to before. Like if you're a food truck operator, you could not be within, I don't know, several hundred feet of a restaurant. Basically, in effect, basically make it illegal to operate a food truck anywhere in that city, or certainly in the downtown area. Even if you were on private property, by the way, like even if you got approval from somebody to like park in their driveway, you are not allowed to operate your food truck. So I sat there all day. That's a different story of just horrors of being at a city council meeting. But when they finally got the law changed, they got a pilot program which allowed food trucks. I may be getting the numbers slightly off here because it's been several years, but like 12 or 13 specific parking spots throughout the entirety of Alexandria that they were allowed to use, and only between the hours of like 11 and 2 and then 7 and 9. Like basically like lunchtime, dinner time, only for a few hours and only in these very, very specific spots. So if you were a food truck operator, you had to like get there first, basically. It was a first come, first serve, and, set up camp in one of these spots. But some of the arguments that people were making against this were like, yeah, but then we'll just have to have traffic delays because food truck operators are trying to park their trucks for 30 minutes. And I'm like, no, they just... And the guy that that I had profiled for the film was like, I'm pretty sure I can parallel park better than basically anybody else here. This is what I do every day. Like if you're a food truck operator, you get pretty good at quickly pulling up to a spot because it gets real to be a big hassle if you don't. It was some of the weirdest objections though, but like stuff like that, to your point, Paul, it was a pilot program. It sucked. It wasn't nearly what I would have wanted to see, but it was a start.
Yep.
And that's, what else are you going to do? I mean, you got to start somewhere. And if the pilot program can show that it's not the end of the world, it's not some radical catastrophe to allow people to operate food trucks between 11 and 2, maybe later they can operate all day. Who knows?
Are you ready for that level of freedom? I don't know. I don't know if you can handle that.
I don't think I could. Just food trucks.
We have too many choices for lunch. This needs to be controlled.
Yeah. Just food where I am without me having to drive somewhere and go get it? I can't even imagine. Shocking. It's bizarre. All this stuff is bizarre. But actually, let's. I want to segue into our into the film that we're going to talk about today, because I actually do think that there's a tiny bit of overlap here, mostly in the character of Matt Damon. We're going to talk about Stillwater, which is a movie that I think is Paul and I were talking about before, while we were sitting here before Jen got on the line, and I think Paul and I were convinced that this was going to be unanimous opinion, or more or less a unanimous opinion on the show. But Jen came in and upended that. So I think we're going to have a more contentious episode than I thought. But let's talk about Stillwater. So Stillwater's a brand new film by Tom McCarthy. Wrote and directed the movie. Tom McCarthy also did Spotlight, which was about the Boston Globe expose of the Catholic priest pedophile scandal, which the Boston Globe broke. Great movie. Highly recommend. And also, which I had kind of forgotten about until I was reading through Tom McCarthy's biography. I didn't remember that he had directed The Station Agent, which is a Peter Dinklage film from like 2003 that I also highly recommend. It's a really wonderful movie. This movie is... We can talk about the Amanda Knox stuff if we want, but I don't know a lot about this. But as I understand it, it's sort of inspired by the Amanda Knox story kind of film, where it's mostly about Matt Damon's character Bill, who plays a father of a girl who has been accused of murder, convicted of murder in France, and is in prison in France. And he is just a blue-collar dude from Oklahoma, works
on oil rigs,
construction, demo,
everything.
Not a wealthy guy, but he seems to spend pretty much all of his available resources flying to France, several times a year, it seems like, to visit his daughter in prison. And the story really revolves around him. Some new evidence supposedly comes to light, and he wants to go investigate it on his daughter's behalf. So that's sort of the gist of the story. I really enjoyed it. I think Paul really enjoyed it. But Jen has a different take. So I'm going to start with Jen, because I want to know, why do you hate good things, Jen?
I have to be the contrarian sometimes. So this movie is gorgeous. It really, really is. It is wonderfully cast. It is exquisitely acted. And there are some really interesting visuals about the dichotomy of Marseille, France, where this is all taking place. There are a lot of interesting things about this movie that I did very much enjoy, but I also thought it was dull as paste. And it couldn't quite decide if it wanted to be like an emotional drama or a little bit of a mystery or a slice of life movie. And because that felt a little confused to me, I couldn't quite get as immersed into this movie as I wanted to. I remember looking at my watch halfway through the movie and going, "Oh my God, I have an hour left." Like,
this is a weird Mirrorverse conversation of one that I had with Paul right before this.
Just not.
Oh man, this is going to be.
I couldn't get into it, despite all of these really wonderful attributes that I felt like I should be enjoying. I was just bored out of my mind. Man. I think maybe I had different expectations going into this movie than y'all did.
What?
And when those expectations weren't met, I was very disappointed and taken out. But
were you thinking Taken? but with
Yeah.
Matt Damon.
Yeah, well,
I was
actually,
kind of hoping that Matt Damon was going to punch people about this.
I kind of pitched it to my wife on that line. By the way, I was like, I don't know, like, because I didn't really know anything about
Right.
like where it was going to go. So I'm like, I don't know. Matt Damon has a daughter in jail and has to like get revenge. I don't know. I don't know what this
He's
is.
gonna take care of business.
It's gonna take care of
I
business.
was like,
But no,
Matt
it didn't
Damon's
turn out to
daughter's
be that at all.
accused
Guys.
of murder in France. He's got
They
to
gotta-
touch people about it.
I will say, without spoiling anything, he does punch one person.
Yes.
There's
One.
one.
No, he punched multiple people.
Well, okay.
there was a lot of punching.
He was.
God.
He gave a couple licks, but guys, this got a standing ovation at the Cannes Movie Festival. Like, this is not going to be Liam Neeson
Correct.
gunning people
They
down.
probably
Correct.
just needed to stretch their legs after that.
Oh my!
All right, counterpoint from Paul.
Yeah. So, I understand where you're coming from. This movie it's a drama, slice of life mystery, but it works. This is one of the we talk a lot about characters and storytelling on this podcast, and I feel like we've been talking negatively about all of the stuff that's been coming out recently. Like a lot, I feel
All the time.
like it just happens a lot, and this movie nails it. You take a character like Matt Damon's Bill. My expectations going into this movie, excuse me, knowing Matt Damon's history, knowing the history of Hollywood, I was expecting him to be maligned, made fun of, not taken seriously.
and to also just be a buffoon in some
Right.
kind of way.
Right.
Right? Like, oh, you're a dumbass.
dumb American from Stillwater.
Yeah.
And they didn't treat him like that. They treated him like an actual human being. And it doesn't just extend to his character, it extends to every single character in this movie.
Yeah.
And it made me deeply care about these relationships that these characters were forming. And the relationship between Bill and Maya is absolutely beautiful. And then you keep learning more about his backstory and his past and why he has such a strained relationship with his daughter. And you see him trying to make amends with Maya, even though it's not his daughter. He sees that she needs a father figure, and he steps into that role and fills it remarkably well.
Yeah.
And he takes his past mistakes and builds on it and makes his future better. But then the reason he's there comes back up.
Yeah.
And it's the scene where they're at the soccer game and he sees him. I knew exactly where he was. I was sitting in the chair, shaking my head. Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do
Yeah.
it.
So let's get into the story a little bit. So Abigail Breslin plays Bill's daughter, Allison, and Allison's been in prison for
5 years?
five years or so at this point. She is not yet resigned to her fate. She is still trying to fight. She is still trying to find ways to prove her innocence and exonerate herself and get herself out of prison. So she hears about a story of some 20-year-old kid bragging in a bar about stabbing somebody who she believes is the girl that she was accused of murdering, who happened to be her girlfriend, but like they're having a relationship. Like basically the backstory is she is with a woman and they're having relationship problems and it's not going very well. And I think that was largely why she was accused of murder, because obviously quite a lot of murders are, jilted lovers and things like that, where it's a very personal issue. And so that was sort of enough for the cops. The cops got their person and they decided that was enough and they didn't have to look into it any further. And, that was enough for the court system because they didn't have enough evidence to convict anybody else, so there we are. But she gets some evidence that there's this guy who was bragging about stabbing her ex-girlfriend, and she tries to have her dad bring that evidence to a lawyer that's working with her, but the lawyer refuses to try to get the case reopened or do anything like that. Just too much work. The evidence is too flimsy. It's just not. She doesn't think it's going to go well. Bill, of course, trying to repair his estranged relationship with Allison, decides to take it upon himself to investigate the situation. Of course, Bill is a character who regularly makes not great decisions. So he lies to his daughter. He tells his daughter that the lawyer did, in fact, say yes, and that she was going to take it back to the judge and try to get the case reopened, when in fact Bill is out there trying to do it himself. He enlists the help of a French woman that he met in a hotel to help translate, because he's going to speak with a bunch of people. He doesn't speak French, so he's going to need a translator. And then they form a relationship. That's how he meets Maya and, all this other stuff. I thought all that stuff was handled beautifully. Again, to Paul's point, I think the character relationships, all the individual characters are really, really well constructed. I know who all of them are, and they feel really real to me. They don't feel like people who are contrived for the sake of a scene or shift characters when the story needs them to. I think Virginia, I'm saying her Virginie, I don't know how you say in France. I'm bad with French, so I apologize. But in any case, she is a very clear character for me. Maya is as well. Allison is. Bill is. Even Bill's mom, Sharon, I think. All super clear, and I don't know. For me, I was really invested in a lot of that, and I'm invested partly because I know that Bill is not. He isn't as smart or as competent as some people might be. He is trying to do better, but he's also still fighting the impulse to make bad decisions, which is, as we continually learn over the course of the film, it's just a thing that he does, all the time. He's clearly a former or a recovering alcoholic,
Had to sit in prison.
He'd been in prison at least once. So he's a good person, or he's trying to be a good person, but he's not a very good person.
He's very impulsive.
He's very impulsive. He's trying to do right, but yeah, he's impulsive. He doesn't have a lot of ability to sort of stop and think through whether or not the long-term consequences of his actions are going to be very good. He's, it seems, doing better at that than he did when Allison was a little kid, but not that well, So that, for me, made Bill a really, really interesting character, because you do have these moments where it's like Bill has a choice to make, and, will he make the wrong choice? First question. And then, to what degree is he going to make the wrong choice is also a question. While still being motivated in a way that is good to me. He's got, this is another thing we talk about a lot, is like the bad understanding morality, or movies that are showing anti-heroes as heroes and stuff like that. Bill has very good motivations. He is not an immorally motivated person, which happens all the time in these other movies. He's not a bad guy. He's just not making great decisions a lot of the time.
He's human.
He's human. And to the credit of the movie, for me, his bad choices have consequences. He doesn't just get to sail through the fact that he's made a bad choice and then nothing happens, And I don't know. For me, that's really refreshing for a movie. But Jen hates fun and good things, so here we are. Well, it's not fun.
Okay, listen.
Fun is the wrong.
Fun. But I know what you mean. Yes.
I really liked each individual aspect of this movie. I loved all of the characters. They were really interesting, and the relationships between them. I loved the visuals. I loved the consequences and the grappling with these decisions. It just didn't come together as a cohesive whole for me, is what it really comes down to. So I agree with all of the things that you're saying. I just don't agree that it
didn't stick the landing.
I don't know.
All right.
It didn't stick the landing for me. Yeah. I'm going to be the East German judge today, I guess.
Do you think, I'm trying not to spoil this movie because we don't.
I
really
really want people that are listening or watching to go see this movie.
I would like people to go see this as well. I also don't think we need. I don't think we need to spoil anything for this movie for it to work. I will say, it doesn't have a classic happy ending, right? Like it doesn't have like a Hollywood happy ending. I'm not going to get into any details about what that means, but like. Was that the reason I bring it up is because I want to know, like, Jen, do you think you would have enjoyed it more had it had like a happy ending?
I don't think so. A happy ending wouldn't have made sense for what these characters went through, what they chose to do, and the fallout from those decisions. Like, it would have been complete absurdity for there to have been a genuinely happy ending in all of this.
Yeah, all right.
Because and that's life. You know, you try really hard for this thing that you've convinced yourself that you need to have in order to be happy, right? And then you get it and it's not exactly what you thought it was going to be. But gosh darn it, you spent so much time and effort getting it that, like, well, now you're kind of stuck with it. You're stuck with your good outcome.
Yeah. I'm not even gonna try to paraphrase it because I don't quite remember it right anyway. And in any case, this would be a horrible spoiler, but I do believe the last line in the film gets to that effect, basically. And I really, really liked how, I think it's the very last line, pretty sure. But I don't know, for me, it stuck the landing. And
sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Oh, life is brutal?
No, well, partly, but no. Sorry, I'm trying not to like really give it away too much, but the little minor spoiler here. Matt Damon says something to the effect that, like, he gets asked whether or not he could go back, and he's like, no, but it was good while it lasted. Basically, we had a good time, and that's enough, right? Like, it's not like it doesn't have to be permanent for something to be good, I guess, was sort of the point. Which again, I'm fairly cryptic, and I'm trying not to like give away too much here, but like
when you watch this, you'll completely understand what Sean's trying to get at. But what I really found fascinating about this movie that you just do not see with things like this, especially when it's depicting Americans, is that I talked about this earlier, but they treated Bill as a real person, and not as a caricature of like a Trump voting Midwestern blue collar idiot.
Yeah,
there was never that moment, and that's what I was expecting, really, honestly, from this. But and it was kind of fascinating.
Well, like
because
they almost have this moment where Bill's like hanging around the kitchen with Virginie and her friends, who are like all French actors, pretty much theater people, you know. So this is
French theater people.
Very
fun.
Oh yeah, super fun. So this is all like very culture clash, but it's again, it's not played for like fish out of water comedy. It's played for like, it's awkward actually, because they don't really understand him. He doesn't really understand them. There's a language barrier also, so that's not great for Bill either. But it's not like, oh, look at Bill, he's such an idiot.
Right.
It's like, wow, this is kind of a weird situation.
They're trying to understand each other.
They're trying to understand each other.
Yeah.
But they ask him, one of the people, like, first of all, they ask him if he owns guns. They're like, I can't believe anybody would own a gun. He's like, yeah, I got 2 guns. Which, for a gun owner, it's not even that much, really.
Yeah, but he also is not.
Oh, yeah, he's also...
no, he's, well,
I don't know if he's a felon necessarily.
Well, I think
he's a felon. Oh, yeah, he would have to have been. So the other question they ask is if he voted for Trump, and he's like, well, no. And they're sort of visibly
shocked.
Relieved, and they're like, oh, whew, okay. And then they're like, and then he goes, well, yeah, I've got a record. I can't vote.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to vote. So it's like, he probably would have voted for Trump, but not allowed to because of his criminal record. But that said, like that, I mean, I think one of the really, really nice things about the movie, and if you're going to draw one lesson out of the movie for me is to draw that, like, Virginie and Bill form this relationship, even though they come from very, very different perspectives, because she recognizes that Bill is a good person and he's good with Maya, and he is helpful and useful, and he is a good guy. And so it doesn't become about, like, well, I disagree with your politics. They don't even really talk about politics for the most part. But, like, it could, and so often in life, I think, devolves into that all the time, where it's like, oh, I don't agree with you, therefore, you're the worst person in the world and I hate you. But instead, she was like, oh, this is a good guy trying to do a good thing for his daughter. He's in a really tough spot. He's really good with my daughter. He's really good around the house. Good person. He's okay, you know? And that's the same is kind of true in reverse, which I think is great. Like she could be somebody who's like this snooty French theater actress who's, you know, wouldn't be kind of enjoyable, but she has a good, you know, she's got a little sense of humor. She's also trying to be helpful. I mean, there's all kinds of things that form that bond in a human way, like a real way.
Yep.
And not in like you're part of that tribe, I hate you sort of way. Just seems gross, but we do that all the time. I mean, it's a thing that I see. Then another thing I wanted to bring up though too is this idea. Again, I don't know that much about the Amanda Knox story. One of our coworkers, Michelle, was staying with me over the last week or so, and she ended up watching like a huge like Amanda Knox like documentary or a series or something. I'm not really sure. I wasn't paying attention when she was watching it, but she then ended up telling me about some of the things in that story, which were very, very much parallels to this story, which were like the cops basically decided that Amanda Knox was guilty and then stopped looking for evidence of anything else. So they found their person, and that was it.
And there's no pressure by the media because it's American.
Yeah, and so the media obviously made her look like some kind of horrible monster. She was, you know, I don't know, just the worst person in the world, and did all these horrible things, or did all these things that people would find shocking or lurid or whatever.
But that weren't true.
Yeah, which she maintains are not true. I think a lot of them were not true. I don't know enough about the story to know like which things were.
Well, knowing how the media operates, probably not true.
But I would be willing to bet a lot that like the vast majority of stuff not true at all. Because all it takes is for a cop to say, "Oh, she was, she did this thing," and then the media will go, "Well, sources say that Amanda Knox," and then that's all you need. The next step is it blows up into a sensational story. It's an international scandal, and it completely biases everybody's opinion of her. You know, and that happened in the movie also.
So the Amanda Knox case took place in Italy, so I paid a little bit more attention to it than maybe I would have otherwise, mostly because I had so many questions about the Italian justice system. Amanda Knox was put on trial twice. There is no protection against double jeopardy.
Wow.
Pretty much anywhere outside of the United States.
God, everybody else's legal systems are terrible. Like ours is not.
Like
ours is incredible in theory and not always executed well. Like everywhere else in the world, it's garbage in theory and garbage in execution. Yeah. It blows my mind.
It's a whole thing, and like the burden of proof is not as high for the prosecution. Like, I think it just has to be a preponderance of evidence, not beyond reasonable doubt. Like, it's a mess. It's a hot mess. And I have a little bit more insight into all of these things than the average American, mostly because I have family over there. They have to live with that legal system and all of that. And so it's tough when people are like, hey, the U.S. needs to be more like Europe about this, that, and the other. I'm like, have you seen Europe? Like, really?
Yeah.
It's tough.
I look, this movie also, I think, did a good job of showing what Marseille looks like in like the real, not just touristy parts.
Right.
And I got to tell you, I like Europe. I've traveled all over Europe. I think I've been to 18 countries in Europe, maybe 17 or 18 countries in Europe. And I enjoy it. I like being there. But that said, Europe is not that well off. Almost everywhere you go, like, it's crumbling infrastructure, crumbling cities, and not like this bridge needs to be repaired, but like this building is starting to fall over. Like, this street is 200 years old and nobody has really updated it or done anything with it in a long time. That's to say nothing of the electrical grid situation or power.
Which they touched on in Stillwater.
Oh, yeah.
Which is absolutely funny.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's an absolute nightmare for this kind of stuff because it's ancient buildings that have been retrofitted with conduit and stuff like that, a dozen times. It's not, I don't understand. Like, people romanticize Europe in ways that is very weird to me. Like, there are really great things.
It's great. I love visiting, but it is a nightmare to live there. And like, trying to change anything is a bureaucratic nightmare.
Yeah, I don't.
You think we have bad bureaucracy?
Very strange. It's very strange to me. I don't understand stuff like that. Like,
my guess is that most people don't make it off the beaten path of the tourist
most
traps.
Tourists don't, right?
And that's what most Americans see in Europe.
I mean, like, so one time I was in Copenhagen, Denmark, and because I had some time, I got on the train and I was kind of in the city center in Copenhagen, which is very, very nice and lovely and whatever. But I had a lot of time, and I was like, why not just ride the train to the end of the line and come back? So I did that. So I sat on the train, and I didn't really at the end of the line, I got off the train and walked around the little town square that it was there. But like, the difference between downtown Copenhagen and out where the train actually goes, where people live in Copenhagen, it's a totally different experience. And once you get out there, you see what you see in a lot of, especially Northern European areas and Scandinavian areas, which is, very old villages, tiny, tiny houses, like, all a lot of times very sandwiched together. Not a lot of shops or entrepreneurship or stuff like that. Like, it's just not. I don't know. I mean, it's weird because obviously you can go out to the suburbs in America and you'll find strip malls and all this kind of stuff. But you'll also find huge yards and, well-maintained areas and things like that. It's just strange to me. I don't know. It's just the romanticism of all that's really weird to me. So I was kind of glad that this movie kind of focused on like the parts of Marseille that weren't as shiny. And
yeah, I mean, and then they had one scene where they went to the shiny part of Marseille. It was nice.
Marseille's version of the projects versus that, lovely beach.
Well, it's also, I found this interesting because they have the projects.
Yeah.
And rough. But then also where Bill lived and this mother who's obviously middle class.
Yeah, it's not that much better.
Not much better.
Yeah, no, I know. I don't know. That's all weird to me. But anyway, let's wrap this up. I think for me, I would highly recommend seeing this. I get Jen's. I think I even said, I think it's probably 20 minutes too long or something. You could definitely condense this movie a little bit.
Yeah.
But that said, the character writing, the character development, overall the storytelling, a lot of the cinematography, all really, really top notch. So I would definitely recommend going to check it out. Don't necessarily need to see it in a theater. It's not a big blockbustery kind of movie. You can definitely watch it on VOD if it comes out for that. But I definitely think you should see it.
No, I 100% agree with that. And if you can see it in a theater, see it in a theater because we talk about prices.
Oh, yeah.
So if this movie can make a profit, then there's going to be more that are made like it and less Black Widows.
Oh, man. Never, there's
or,
never been
or Army of the Dead, or all these movies we've reviewed this year that are just
oh man, we should have put Army of the Dead. Sorry, I'm just thinking about a section in the new Out of Frame episode where I talk about how kind of bad the media landscape is, and I didn't even think to tell Oz to include
there's
Army
just so
of the
many
Dead.
to choose
That's
from.
how
so many.
forgettable that movie was.
That was how I couldn't even remember it on a list that I was making of bad movies.
The only reason why I remembered that movie is because I went back through and looked at all the movies we talked about this year to try to remind myself of any movie I liked.
Yeah.
Because I was like, Stillwater, this is my favorite movie of the year so far. I highly recommend it.
All right, Jen, for the contrary view.
I'm not going to say don't watch this movie. I think it's worth watching. It's gorgeous. Just have your expectations correctly adjusted before you go into the movie theater. This is not an action movie. Don't look for Matt Damon to punch people about things.
The Bourne Ultimatum, this ain't.
This is a drama.
This is not it. This is not it. So, honestly, I would recommend it. I'm honestly probably going to watch it again.
Ooh.
Not anytime soon. Like I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna let it marinate, and then I'm gonna come back to it when it's like probably on VOD or something like that. But yeah, I think this is definitely worth your time and consideration.
Yeah,
it is at the very least an exquisite character study.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all we have time for today. But if you are a patron or a Subscribe-Star supporter of Out of Frame or Behind the Scenes, stick around. We're going to continue this conversation with some Q&A right after the break here. But for everybody else, please, if you like the show, consider subscribing on those channels. It's subscribestar.com/outofframeshow or patreon.com/outofframeshow. Definitely check us out on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and of course on YouTube. So check us out on all those channels. Join our email list, all the things, and we'll see you next time.